Katoa, no mai, haere mai. Welcome to this amazing kōrero with community research and our stunning May webinar. Community research is the place to find webinars, research and resources for the tangata whenua, community and voluntary sector. The knowledge and resources that we share via this webinar, newsletter and on our website are all focused on helping community groups to work more effectively to improve equity in our community. Our other aim is to help support whānau to have access to and share knowledge. We invite you to share your research and information by uploading it up to the website www.communityresearch.org.nz so that others can benefit from your knowledge. To be kept informed on anything that's happening in this kaupapa, there is a Facebook page and also some other resources that we'll share. We'll talk about that towards the end of this event. But without further ado, I'm so pleased to introduce the stunning Ngapera Riley, my dear friend, but also an amazing exponent and advocate for data. Today, we're going to be speaking about how we might utilise and harness the power of data. And Ngapera is going to take us on a journey to understand her world more, but also to help connect you to tools and resources that we hope will help you unlock the data to create more impact in your work and in your community. Nō reira, e te tuahine, nau mai Ngapera, welcome. Tell us a bit about yourself and your mahi.
Tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora Kay Marie, and thank you also for all of the mahi that you do for our people across a lot of different spaces. Tēnā rā koutou katoa, ko te arawa te waka, ko Ngāti Unuku kōpa, ko Ngāti Roro te rangi, Ngāti whakaue me tūhaurangi o Puhapu. My name's Ngapera Riley. I was born and raised in Rotorua. I'm from a long line of activists and change makers, actually. And so from birth, I found myself grounded in many transformational movements for our people, often movements that are started at the community ground up, movements like Te Kohanga Reo, that fought to save our culture through language and education and started from the grassroots community. As children, we were involved in a lot of marches and a lot of protests. We fought against racism with the Springbok Tour. We marched against land rights, nuclear testing in the Pacific. And I still march to this day for Ihu Mātau, for Black Lives Matter, for climate change, and any issues I feel deeply passionate about. But when I was thinking about how I want to make an impact for Aotearoa in this country that we love so much, I decided I needed to march in a little bit of a different way. So I decided to commit myself to technology and to data to just try and scale those efforts. And I realized I cared so much about so many things, about education, about social services, you know, health, our rangatahi, business, to figure out what is the thing that I can actually contribute my time and energy to. And I chose data because data really underpins all of it. And so our mission at FigureNZ is democratization of public. And yeah, we build tools, we open data, and we try and make it really accessible and easy to use because we want to empower thousands of community organizations and charities and, you know, there's so many awesome people doing mahi for communities in Aotearoa. They're often under-resourced, they're overworked. A lot of us do it for love and voluntary efforts. So our thing is if we can provide information, reputable, reliable information that communities can trust and use, that you will be able to either better understand the space that you're going into if you're not an expert in that space. B, you could advocate for change using information. And the thing that most people who work in communities tend to use data for is to help get funding and to help solve some of those issues. And it's my fierce belief that that as people, we can make a change and we can make a difference, but we need data. It's just one tool. It's just one tool we can use, but data can really help us do that. Yeah, that's the tiny mega intro. But why do I love data so much? Basically, we're living in an age where digital connection and access to information has just changed so rapidly. It's changed the way we live, it's changed the way we can share things, changes the way we can communicate. And really, in a good way, that changes the hierarchy of how power can be distributed, if we think about it in that way. So data now is one of the most valuable assets of this whole world. And so learning how to use it and understand it is possibly one of the most valuable decision-making tools of our time. And so I'm really on a mission to help people get to use it and even find it. But yeah, that's the genesis of what we're trying to do. I think of it as tino rangatiratanga, self-determination. If we can have access to data about the things we care about, then we can actually advocate for change and get things moving. So that's why I'm in it, and that's why I love it so much.
Wow, your passion for data is simply infectious, because of course it's so important to understand and participate in this new economy, which, as you say, this is the new gold of the 21st century. And I love the statement that you made, that your kaupapa, your commitment is about democratizing data, or the democratization of data, because often it's big multinational companies that are harvesting your data, utilizing your data, gathering insights and information, often without your consent and without your knowledge. So helping individuals, groups, organizations to find the information that they require. But I also think the other beauty of your work, Ngapera, is that you encourage people to inquire and ask questions. Yes. Which is, why is it like that? Why is this information being presented? And most importantly, where did you get your data from? Okay. And as we've learned from the recent census, that wasn't rolled out in the best way possible. There's been a lot of learnings there. But it also tells us that a lot of the data that had been captured doesn't tell a decent enough story about Aotearoa generally, but also Māori and Pasifika people and where we're situated here in Aotearoa. So, Ewa, can you tell us a bit more about FigureNZ? I know you've got a presentation to share with us so that we can see visually some of the cool things that you get up to.
Yeah, so this is probably the point where I acknowledge our founder, Lillian Grace, and all of the people that volunteered their time and efforts. So FigureNZ, we're a charity. We do build high-tech things, and it is a big piece of work, but we're a charity. We fundamentally exist because we could see that data was becoming such an important part of this modern world, and we could see a world where there was going to be even more inequities between those who could use data and access it and those who couldn't. And we don't need any more inequities in our society. So we were like, the problem we initially set out to solve was New Zealand's public information, even 10 years ago, was all over the place. You know, we've got heaps of different, we've got amazing data sets in Aotearoa, but unless you're kind of an expert and you know where to find it, you know who collects it, and you know what that data set is actually called, you wouldn't be able to find it, because the data currently sits on hundreds of websites and all of it is in different formats. You know, certain government agencies, even though they're really trying hard to open their data, a lot of it's just sitting in spreadsheets that you've got to dig around and find on their websites or you get permission for. So it's just another barrier, really. So what we do at FigureNZ, we set about to solve that problem. Why is our information all over the place? Especially when actually it's our information, it's the people's information. It belongs to us, we surface it. So how can we think about differently about how we do that? So yeah, it took us 8 years. We started as volunteers and we really started to hack that problem. And we knew that government couldn't solve it, even though they may have wanted to, because they just weren't in a position to really step back and think about this as a whole country problem. And it is a whole country's problem. So yeah, basically what we do, I do have a presentation, but we take reliable data and information from around 175 different sources, government agencies such as Ministry of Education, Ministry of Justice, MB, Environment, as well as certain organisations and charities who publish quality information. And we put it all into a website, which is FigureNZ. And I can show, it's probably easier for me to show you all how that looks like, and we've got a few tools. But all of this data is able to be sourced back. We turn all of the data out of the spreadsheets, we put it into charts, and we make it really easy for you to find. And everything we do, we put into everyday English, so that our focus is really non-experts at FigureNZ. We know experts can find and use data really well. That's Kei Te Pai. And we know they use it because they spend heaps of money on it and they hire the top people to analyse the information. Yeah, but still, so FigureNZ, and we make everything for free. And it's also downloadable. It's Creative Commons licensed, so that we know it's safe to share. And we actually design it so that people can download the pictures, or they can download the data if you want to do that. And it's really awesome. We've also understood, though, that in the last few years since I've come on board with FigureNZ, that, you know, surfacing the data and making it easy to find and use was actually only solving the first half of the problem. We realized that if communities and charities and NGOs and the people we design this for aren't actually brought along the journey with data literacy, then we have to actually solve that problem at the same time. So during lockdown last year, we launched Learn. That's learn.figure.nz. And that is a free resource, really basic resources to get people to understand how to use data, how to ask basic questions of it, and just some tools, tips and tools on, you know, why public information exists, what is the census, what does it do, and all of those things. So yeah, we're at the fun part now. We're actually, we've been around for 8 years doing our work, and we're at the fun part where we can actually build tools. So yeah, we also launched the first Māori data platform last year, which is Māori.figure.nz. And so we gathered all of the information, all of the data we could find that's for and about Māori. We gathered all of the top research projects, reports that use information. And we also gathered all of the tools that people could use for, you know, if you're interested in knowing information about Māori. So it's all on there. And it was awesome because we had around 13,000 people have used that Māori data site. That shows us there's a real need for that. But also out of that, we had requests from the Pacific community, from the disabled community, and from youth advocates to say, oh, this is a really great tool for Māori. Can you build one for us? And so because of that request came from the community, we're actually actively building 3 sites, Pacific data, disability data, and rangatahi data. So watch out for those. We'll launch those in the next few months.
That's so awesome, Ngapera. And again, what I'm hearing is the desire to not only surface data, which I like that, but it's also about how might you interpret it, yes. How do you make sense of it, and then how as an organisation do you utilise it to help drive your decision making, or more importantly, or alongside that, how do you know that what you're doing is really making a difference in the communities that you serve?
That's right. There's so many different ways that data can be used, and I think as a society, we're really used to seeing data used in ways that, you know, here's the data, I want to prove my point, so you should invest in this. You know, we're used to using data, we're used to using data in a way that supports our beliefs that already exist. And I kind of want to flip the script on that. I really think actually data can be used, we should be asking better questions of data, and particularly, you know, why is that data there? Who's collected it? Why have they collected it? Because the reality is most of the public data that's currently collected in New Zealand, and we have amazing amount of data, it's all really collected as a byproduct of a service or a product. And what that means is when you enroll into a course, you go and see the doctors, you register your car or your dog, all of this information is collected and we publish it. So you can go and see how many dogs are in your region, how many cars are in your city, how many babies are being born, what people are dying of. All of this is public information. But again, it's collected as a byproduct of a service or a product, a lot of it. So they're not necessarily, the data's not necessarily gathered in the way that we want to use it sometimes, if that makes sense. But because it's there, we often gravitate to the closest data set we can find that suits our needs, and that's what we have to use. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's why things like surveys, census data, business operations surveys can get a lot deeper information. Because it's really designed to understand people more, right? It's bringing people into the center of the data and the information that exists. So yeah, it's really, once you delve into the world of data, and really data is just a fancy word for it's information expressed as numbers. And I think that's why a lot of people are quite afraid of it. Or they get a bit scared, like, oh, I'm not a numbers person, or you know, there's a lot of fear around data and information. But I just want to encourage people not to think about data that way, because actually behind the numbers are communities, there's lives, there's people. And if we keep pulling people back into the center of the data and the center of all that we do, to me, that's a really important thing. And data really, everybody can use it. Everybody can use it. And there's a lot of really awesome examples of how it's getting used. And I love when people use FigureNZ data. Went to a workshop just yesterday in Wellington, a presentation on palliative care data. And somebody came up to me and said, oh my gosh, your FigureNZ, that's so cool. Hey, look, I used your information last year to get funding for our information for our charity, and I just wanted to thank you guys for surfacing that information, and it was so easy to use, and it just made my heart so happy, because that's why we do the work that we do all day, is so that actually people can use it. So when we hear examples of people using our data, other examples are a Māori company used our information to get capital funding and investment to take their business to the next level. We've had organisations use the data from FigureNZ to help with their strategy, help with funding applications. It's awesome. So if you've used our data and you want to share how you use it, we love to hear about it, because that's exactly why we exist, to serve all of you.
Well, that's so awesome. And I love it. You had this, you got a young student, I was going to say young kōrero, rangi Māori, and she makes a comment here which says, you can know things that are interesting instead of just guessing. And I think that's so important. You said two things which I thought were quite interesting. One is often people can utilize data to just back up their own bias. Mm-hmm. And sometimes positive bias too, but often we're using it for a purpose. The other part I heard in the back of my mind was weaponizing data for an outcome. Yeah. So that's something that we have to be conscious of. But I love the thought of being able to be evidence-backed in your decision-making. But then, as you say, how do you get that information? Often it's expensive to find data analysts and specialists in the field. It's hard to find people to support you to make and interpret the data. And then the other kind of big cost is making sense of it for your own community and your own needs and requirements. So I love this mahi that you're doing.
I love the mahi too. And the thing is, even though you might not be a specialist or you might not be an analyst, and I certainly am not either, I was really scared of numbers, actually. I struggled with maths and statistics and everything at school. I told myself this story as a young woman that I wasn't a maths person, and I was a people person, which I am. But, you know, you've got to be careful about the stories we tell ourselves, because actually everybody can understand information. And I think often when we talk about data, you know, it's often revered as, you know, the be all and end all. And, you know, people talk about being data driven and, you know, that kind of annoys me in a way, because we shouldn't be data driven. Yes, data is an important tool and we can all use it a little bit better to understand things and sometimes solve things, but it's really just one tool. It's just a tool for our kete of things that we all have, right? When you think about the work that happens in communities, you've got actual knowledge, you've got people with decades of experience, you've got community connections, mātauranga Māori. These are all really important forms of knowledge, and data is just another one. It's just another part of the tools that we can use. But I think it's can play a really important part. And the thing is, there are gaps in data. It's certainly not perfect. No data is perfect, actually. And that's why if you're able to question, if you're able to find data and you're able to ask questions and have a little bit of a play on it, you don't have to be an expert, but that might lead you into, oh, who is the experts? Because we have a lot of incredible researchers and people in our communities doing good things. But if we know the right questions when we go to these experts, that's going to save a lot of time and energy, and you can get to the crux of the issue rather than starting from the beginning and not even knowing anything about the topic that you reach out to researchers, because researchers are busy people. But the thing with researchers, they've taken years, they can go really deep on a topic. So, they have the context, they have really deep knowledge, so that's why everyday people like us, if we can actually surface a little bit of that information and get some of that data first, it can be very helpful. And then when we reach out to our experts, the conversation can proceed at a faster pace.
Ngapera, you're also part of Te Mana Raraunga, which is the Māori Data Sovereignty Network. Can you just give us an insight into what is the role of that organisation, and how has it also played a role in the way that you develop or design or undertake your services with FigureNZ?
It's a very interesting, I sit in a really unique space. So obviously I'm a really huge proponent for open data, right? I think that opening data is possibly the most important thing that we can do. But it's important to differentiate between the different types of data that exist. So to be clear, the data that we open up and make public on FigureNZ and all of the other tools is really, it's public aggregate data. And that's just a fancy word to say that it's data that's collected about the New Zealand public. And aggregate data means that, that there's no personal information attached. For example, abortion data, right? It's a very sensitive topic. We do publish abortion data, but there's no way that you can see where those women are from or identify them within their communities. And we wouldn't want to ever publish data that would be not, could be used against people in that way. So aggregate data just shows this is how many abortions took place, and this is kind of what ages. We also track it over time so that you can see actually abortions are decreasing in our country or things like that. That's just a random example. So that's aggregate data, and that is the data I believe we need to publish more of, and I encourage a lot of people to publish more data. With Māori data, and so, sorry, I'll get to my point in a minute. The data that we try and protect at Te Mana Raraunga is data from the IDI usually. And the IDI is what is it called? Integrated Data Infrastructure. It's basically where all of the personalised information and data sits protected somewhere in Wellington. In order to access that data, now this is all the personalised information. So if you're on a benefit, you're getting hospital care, any of that information actually sits in the IDI. Now to access, that's really useful data. But again, that could be, like you say, weaponized if it's not used correctly. Do you know what I mean? So we want to really protect that information. And you have to have an ethics application to apply to get to there. It's actually quite a mission, and you often have to pay money to access that data. But that's really that we advocate for protecting that information. For example, if you were collecting, if you were if you were collecting, say you put Te Whare Hauora, there's a beautiful charity that does sensors in homes to collect moisture. The idea is that we don't want our people living in damp homes. So that data, if, say, Housing New Zealand collected that data and put sensors in all those homes, they could see things like, you know, are the homes damp? Do they have adequate heating? So those are all things that could be used really positive. But the thing you have to be careful about that is if you could see kind of by the sensor, by the data they measure, whether there's overcrowding in that house. So, for example, we wouldn't want Housing New Zealand to use that data and go, oh, the overcrowding, cut your benefit and kick you out of the house. Like, that's an example where data could go wrong. So that's why we really want to protect who can access different types of information. So I'm an outlier in Te Mana Raraunga. So the Māori Data Sovereignty Network, it's a network of advocates and specialists, Māori researchers, mostly with doctorates, that really advocate for the special interests around Māori data. And we really want to make sure that Māori personalised information is protected, and that actually we should, as Māori, we should actually only have access to that data, and we should be owning and storing some of that information. And particularly when it comes to iwi data, we believe that iwi should own that data, and it shouldn't actually be a government. Government shouldn't own that. And there's a whole lot of things that we advocate for. You know, we're moving into a space where there's artificial intelligence and, you know, different mapping tools coming out. So we just want to make sure that Māori have a voice in that, and that the information is used to help us and not against us. So yeah, I ruffle a few feathers in there, but that's good, because, you know, it's really good to have those conversations. And our people do, you know, Māori data has traditionally not been collected well. And we see that with the census, only 68% of us filled that out. With the Pacific community, only 65%. So, you know, that's a big deal, because if you're not counted, or if our data is missing and it's fragmented, it's impossible to advocate for change. So we want to make sure that we have adequate data, but also on the Te Mana Raraunga front, we want to make sure that the data that is being used for Māori is collected well and used for our benefit. Because we wanted to self-determine our futures. And but yeah, there's a delicate balance between opening data and then knowing what needs to be protected. So we're still all learning in this journey, because this is a very new journey. There's more data than there's ever before. So it's a really interesting space to work in. And also just to understand, you know, what should be collected by government, and what there's a lot of gaps out there, and what should we be collecting ourselves? You know, should our own iwi be collecting our own information, you know? And so that's the kind of the dichotomy with Māori data sovereignty, and then the open data movement as well.
Yeah, that's a big one. It's a big one. And more governments, more and more populations are looking for open data, increasing access. And one of the most important aspects, I believe, in the role that Te Mana Raraunga and also our other Indigenous brothers and sisters of the world who are also gathering around data protection, is it's about protection. It's about being custodians and guardians, and being really mindful and conscious of what is the purpose and the intent of information being gathered, what for and why.
Yes.
And then I've also found there are some really interesting dichotomies between different nations, nations such as China, who basically have carte blanche access to all of these citizens' information, and their societies are quite open to it, because it's how they have operated for a very long time. Versus countries like Aotearoa, where we are fiercely guarded of the information that we provide, and sometimes question the role of government, how much information do they need to have as well. So thank you, Ngapera, for giving us an insight into your mahi with Te Mana Raraunga.
It's really interesting. One of the questions that's been posed to us recently is the Department of Internal Affairs. So they collect births and death data. So when you have a birth certificate, or you die, you have to fill out a death certificate. They collect all of that information. It's amazing information. That's how we know how many babies are going to be born, or, you know. So anyway, one of the questions that they are currently, because we have such a lack of quality iwi data, and every iwi is trying different things, but also, as we know, with iwi, everyone's in a different position to be able to focus on different areas. But one of the questions recently is, should we be collecting iwi data on the birth certificates? Is that the point where we start collecting iwi data there, so that we can track it through a lifetime, you know, in terms of education, and then we don't have to keep asking people what's their iwi as you go along to all of the things. But of course, that just poses so many questions, because it depends on who's filling out the birth certificate, how much knowledge they have, but also that is a really good, the purpose and the intent. What are we going to use with the data for? And that's why we need the fierce advocates to stop and go, hang on a minute. You know, once we go down that track, we can't reverse it back up. So we want to make very, very, very sure that the data is collected, and that takes some big brains around the table.
Totally. And I'm so glad that you're there. And I like the fact that you're rustling feathers there, Ngapera. I think it's super important to keep asking some of those really tricky questions and asking what for and why. And there's also, you know, there's lots of layers in this space as well. We've got our first question for the day.
Yes.
So kia ora, Sarah. The question asks, regarding data being gathered in New Zealand, do you see data collected omitting data collection on race? And if so, is this more common than not? How do you see data that is collected in New Zealand be different than data collected around the world regarding race, when New Zealand uses the term ethnicity a lot across public and private sectors? She's seeing data collected that doesn't even seek out race-based data, but asks for ethnicity instead. E.g., Australian isn't an ethnicity on a Ministry of Education public school application, but it is a nationality. But there isn't a section on race. So that feels like a layered question. And
Very layered question, and I think that's coming from Sarah Smith, is it?
Yes.
Kia ora, Sarah, and I acknowledge Sarah's work. She does a lot of important work in racial equity, and helping, you know, actually helping break down those barriers. And for those of us, you know, it's a lifetime mission. So kia ora, Sarah. I'd have to think about that a little deeper. At the moment, because I'm not an expert on everything relating to data, but yes, we do collect some ethnicity data, which is helpful. But I would have to go a little bit deeper in what constitutes race versus ethnicity, because I'm not sure if, I am sorry, I can't answer that question. I'll have to, we have a lot of gaps in ethnicity data, and it still can be collected better, and we're trying to publish as much as we can. And just so you know, we can only publish on FigureNZ data that is safe enough to share. So we can't publish everything, and we're only a small team of 10 people trying to do this work. So there are gaps, but certainly if you have any questions relating to things, come through to myself or my data team. My data team are the better experts. They know details on these things. But probably the safest question I can give at the moment is we need to do a lot better on both ethnicity data, but also in the race space, to understand where the issues, you know, need to be sorted.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess my little 2 cents worth here is that data collection is so vital. Is so vital to so many different levels, not only the way that governments allocate funding out into the regions, but it also helps to determine political boundaries or voting boundaries, and whether or not we get an increase or decrease in seats in certain regions.
That's right.
The way that health funding is allocated, and when the 40-odd% Māori and Pacifica people that aren't counted not included, then you can imagine that the investment in those regions where it might be really needed, those particular individuals that need support might be excluded.
That's right. And they're often the ones that need lots more support, right? So it's a huge issue, data collection, and that's what we advocate for. And actually, you know, understanding the gaps from people who serve communities, like all of you on here. They're really important. And I actively, you know, am taking a list of those gaps in data. So if there are clear gaps, please let me know. I'd love to come and have a coffee. And I want to advocate at the highest level for better data collection. But one thing it's important to understand when we think about data collection is, you know, what are the gaps? What do you want to know? If it exists, what would you use it for? And really think about, again, what is the purpose of intent of collecting data? Because collecting data is actually, it's a science, it's really hard. And in some cases, it's expensive to do. So if we know and understand why we need to collect that data, we can advocate the right people to start doing the right things.
Awesome. And Garth has also asked a quick question or has made an observation that it looks like there's only one chart on the not-for-profit sector, because a lot of our viewers today are from the not-for-profit sector. Are there any plans to make more charts available in the not-for-profit sector?
Sorry, I'm just going to have a look now on what... not-for-profit. That's the chart that says not-for-profit institutions serving households. I'll just have to have a look. I guess so. I'm not sure if there is an organisation that data looks like it's collected out of Stats NZ, and that's coming out of the business demography statistics, enterprises by institutional sector. I would hope that there would be, but again, if we don't know the gaps exist, and you know, I think if there was a huge need for that data set to be collected, and there was people from the community that advocated for more information, that could be a possibility. Sometimes when you're searching on FigureNZ and other sites, for example, a good one, a lot of people ask us for data on homelessness. It's a big topic, it's a hot topic, something that needs to be solved. So if you type in homelessness in FigureNZ, you won't get anything. But if you type in housing, there is data on people that live in unsuitable housing. And this again comes back to how data is collected and then how actual humans search for it. And that's just something that we're working on all the time. So the data may not be there, but if you search deeper into that, there's probably a researcher that does information on the not-for-profit sector. But yeah, the data is probably sitting somewhere. We either may have not published it yet, or it just doesn't exist in a way that's safe enough to share. But I've made a note of that, and I'll check with my data team. Thank you.
And it sounds like a good opportunity as well for those of you out in the not-for-profit sector who think that there's a whole stack of data that could be surfaced from this area, and especially the organisation that Garth works with in social impact and in the not-for-profit sector generally. I think there'll be some really valuable opportunities for you to connect and share. So Ngapera, talk to us. Now we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into FigureNZ, and mainly because our whānau here, we've got 77 whānau that have linked in today, so it's awesome to have you here. You know, they only have short windows and opportunities to hear, learn, and grab something tangible out of these corridors so they can apply to their organisation.
Right.
So,
well, what I'll do, can I get Dan, lovely Dan, can I get you to put up the my presentation? I did have a lovely presentation, and can I get you to just flick through? Dan, keep going through. Sorry, I can't. Keep going until we get to the FigureNZ one. So this is just all my kōrero about all the different ways we actually use data in communities. You know, election data, the spread of misinformation and things. Keep going. Keep one more. There you go. Okay, so for everybody who hasn't had a chance to go on FigureNZ, I'm just going to use this chance, if you don't mind, Kay Marie, to talk to FigureNZ. So this is what our FigureNZ site looks like. Researchers in particular love it. We have over 44,000 charts and data sets updated. It's you know, you can download everything on there. It's designed to share. Sometimes if you can't search for the right thing, just keep searching, or go down to the bottom of our site and send us a question. So we have a thing called Fresh Desk. It's our data team. We often get people saying, oh, we want to find data, but we, you know, we just can't find data on this particular thing. So if it doesn't exist on our site, my team will know where to find it, and we'll hopefully be able to either surface some information or maybe make an introduction to somebody who can. That's our main site. It looks pretty on the front end, but on the back end, there is a lot of data, and we spend most of our time, some of our time, I'd say 10%, publishing new data that becomes available, and we have a big calendar of everything that's going to get published, but we probably spend most of our time updating the data. So if data is collected, say census data is every 5 years, we'll update, and every thousands of charts get updated as we publish. So it's a really scalable way to update the information. Some data, like some of the economic data, is updated monthly or every 3 months, and we just do our best to try and keep the machine running. Next, that's our main website. If you could carry on. This is the Māori.figure.nz site I was talking about. We spent a lot of time engaging with communities to how we could do that. If you're interested about data that exists for and about Māori, it's a really awesome site. And have a play through there. There's tools like land visualization tools. There's the latest research reports from Burl and PwC and others. I mean, the thing with data is that for so long, only experts and governments and others have been accessing it, you know, so they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on these reports, but unless you know they exist, you'll just never see that information. So we've tried to list all of that in there too. So that's Māori.figure.nz. Feel free to use that if you need data for and about Māori. The next one, what have we got? Right, this is a tool that we designed for small businesses. If you're a small business getting started, you know, obviously there's just so much data out there. So this is a tool that takes your industry and your location, and it surfaces data by industry, workforce, customers, and all of that. There's a lot of data in there. It doesn't cover every industry. We use ANZIC codes, which is when you register your business. You have to fit into a box. But again, it's just another tool that you can learn. It's really good for tools like market validation or just understanding just things that you may not have thought about. A good example of that is if you were a florist and you wanted to set up shop in, say, Nelson, you could go on that site and you could see how many other florists are in your region. Now, you may have known that because Nelson's small and you can know that, but you could easily just look that up. But also, it might what our technology does is it surfaces other things that may be useful. For example, births and deaths and marriages. So it might surface data to show you that actually here's where all the funerals are happening and here's where the most weddings are. So maybe you could start ordering, you know, just helpful information like that. So that's Business Figures. That's another free tool on our site as well. And then the last one, sorry, I'm rushing through all of this. This is our first attempt, and we need to put a lot more time and effort in here. This one's sponsored by our friends at Internet NZ. But basically this came out of trying to understand how people use data. And it's a very basic resource designed to help non-experts use data and do things. So have a play through that. There's some really interesting things there. And also, if anybody wants to contribute to it, or you have something that you would like to share with others, well, we're happy to put that on the site as well. So these are just some of the tools and the resources with FigureNZ. Again, it's not a perfect resource and we don't have all of the data, but we do our best. We are a charity, and it is actually very hard to fund this when everybody else is commercializing data, making money off it, and we're out here doing the complete opposite. But we love what we do. Sorry, is there another question there?
There is another question here. It's from Kay, who's asking, if a non-profit wants to collect data from people in community for identifying problems, would FigureNZ be able to advise on how to do this, both for useful sharing, but also to ensure sensitive data is protected? What kind of tips would you give?
That's a really good question. And actually that is a resource that we're currently trying to work on. For example, when COVID hit, right, iwi activated and Māori organisations activated beautifully in the space. They got out there, they were giving kaipaks to their kaumātua, they were out on the ground doing amazing things. But everybody started collecting data differently. And it was a really amazing time actually to stop and think about, oh man, we can collect some really good information about our people. But of course, it all happened, you know, it all happened how it happened. But I think if there was some guidelines that could have been used and shared so that there could have been some consistency across how we collected the information and the questions we asked. Data collection is a real special, it's a special area. So I would invite you to get in touch with us and see if there, you know, for some advice. Again, this is the type of thing researchers spend years on actually designing survey questions and thinking about those really carefully. So it's something to tread carefully before you just go out and start collecting information. But there's certainly help out there, and it's really made me think about adding some more resources about sharing around how community organisations can collect data and protect it as well. Most people will collect it in a spreadsheet, in an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Docs or whatever they're using, and that's completely fine. But I think, again, it comes down to respecting data and acknowledging that, you know, you can't, when you start collecting data that's got people's addresses and email addresses and, you know, I don't know, might be health ailments, you know, that's really private information you're collecting. So you can't just be sending those spreadsheets around willy-nilly so people can access them, because, you know, people do all kinds of weird things when they get information. They'll like email everybody on a spreadsheet just to sell their product or whatever, you know, like, so we do want to be very careful. I will have a look into if there are any guidelines that exist around collecting data, and I'll come back to community research and see if we can help share that.
Awesome, that's great. And I'm also seeing some whānau already starting to connect up and saying, hey, look, we're on the same journey. We'd love to help and support and assist. Excuse me, everybody, I keep like shaking. I'm in this corner room of my home. And of course, in the moment when you're doing a live webinar, flies are just tending to just fly across. So if anybody's just noticing that, I'm really conscious of it. So I thought I'd just talk to that. So in case you see me kind of flying in the background, that's, or my hands are flying around, that's why. It just happened to happen at this moment in time. But coming back to data collection, data process, perhaps the team at Community Research can also help, because of course community research is about community-led research. It's going to help highlight, support community development, data and the screeds of data that's out there. The important role that you're playing at FigureNZ Ngapera is so critical to our communities. And the resources that you're developing to help community organisations prepare and organise themselves for this journey ahead is so important. For you, if you were a chief executive or a manager of a community provider, what are your top 5 tips that you give them in regards to what they need to think about in regards to the data they collect and the data that they need to protect and the data that they store?
First of all, one of the things I talk about often is I consider data to be a taonga, right? It's a taonga in the same way that Te Reo Māori is a taonga. And so when it is a taonga, you want to make sure that you care about it and you protect it, right? But in the same way that Te Reo Māori, if we don't use it, we lose it. It's the same concept, right? If we don't learn our language, and then we can't unlock the potential of what it has to hold. So if you view data in that same way, and you view data and information as a taonga that is precious, we can use it to unlock certain things. But also that means we do need to we do need to protect that information. If leaders of organisations start to view data differently, I think we will start to both collect the data, and I really believe that community organisations that are doing this good work, if everyone got on this data journey, we'll be able to start collecting really awesome information that's meaningful to you. So if you start collecting data, then you own it and that you can use it. But you really want to think about, why are you collecting the information and what do you want to do about it? And also, what are the stories that you want to tell in your space? And if you think about it, most people use data in a leadership role. They'll put it in their annual reports. They'll have a dashboard to kind of monitor how things are going. But, we could do a little bit more in that. So top tips, get curious. Start thinking about, as an organisation, what is the data that you could collect? And if you start collecting it, how can you actually share it? Not just for using it for your own organisation, but can it be shared to help others? Can we publish it, for example? That's exactly what we do, right? We publish data and we publish it and we put it in the realm so people can share it. And that means even if somebody's not interested in the data in 6 months' time, we've still got the data there. So care about your data, protect your data, think about what you're going to do with it. And if you can think about how you're going to share that information, that will really help, I think, align your goals. If you haven't got a data strategy in place for your organization, let's start thinking about that. Let's start thinking about that, and let's start getting your boards and your governance to think about these ways too. If there's money that's needed to help bring in a data analyst or somebody to help your organization really switch this up, the onus is on you guys as CEOs, and to really take the charge of this. It's a really exciting space. And the thing is, people are only now just starting to collect data. One of the things we're doing actually with the wellbeing space is we are trying to develop a wellbeing tool that takes the exact same questions that government agencies are asking, and we're trying to put it into a tool so that community organisations can ask the exact same questions, so that we can start collecting data and surface it up so that there's a bit of standardisation across what's been collected. Totally geeky, but that is another tool that we're trying to work on.
Oh, I love Data Geeks. It's awesome. Couple of things too, Juanma, there is a website which will also integrate the FigureNZ into as well. And it's www.whatworks.org.nz.
You've gone on mute.
It's a collection, sorry, Whānau, of different sites and research platforms for community organisations like yourselves to find tools, case studies and opportunities to help create community-led research opportunities, and it's really, really fantastic. So that's a tool. Secondly, there is also a series of tools that the community research team will be pulling together, and it'll be lovely, Ngapera, to bring what you know and also what this amazing organisation has, so that we can provide even more benefits to those of you that have tuned in today. And also Amber, kia ora Amber, from Other Journeys. She's also keen to collaborate because a lot of their work in the citizen science space, where rangatahi and their apps are gathering information live in time, link that up with FigureNZ and get that out into the community could be really, really awesome.
Love to talk to you, Amber.
Awesome. Hey, Whānau, look, we've got 5 minutes left, and for the last couple of minutes, I just want to open the floor for anyone that wants to ask Ngapera a question, and also and also I'm going to share what are the next steps in regards to this particular presentation from today. But Hayley also has a question for you, Ngapera. What consent do we need from the person we are collecting data from? Very good question, Hayley.
Oh, very, very good question. That would depend on what data you're collecting. but it's always a good idea to get consent. And again, that's going to come back to people will want to know generally, what am I consenting to, what the data is going to be used for, and of course you'll be subject to all of the usual laws under the Privacy Act and Official Information Act that if they come back and ask you, what are you doing with my information, you have to provide that. So I think that just a very clear, if you're going to start collecting data, it's usually just a little briefing document. This is what we're doing. This is what we're going to use it for. Are you happy for us to use that information? But again, I am sure that there are really awesome resources out there that can help with that. So let me have a look at that and just see. Somebody might have done a really fancy tool already on consent for data collection.
Okay, stunning. Hey, look, also from the team from Community Research and also Ngapera, it would be great to start to establish a community of practice around data. So that many of you have same challenges, same questions, and probably need to ask the same questions as well. So it'll be a great place to share resources, share information, share updates. And also Ngapera, it will be fantastic for FigureNZ to be able to share into that community. Hey, look, we've got these reports that are coming up through FigureNZ. Keep your eyes peeled for the next thing.
That's right.
And then Garth has also shared a whole stack of not-for-profit data that's been gathered and collected by the philanthropic sector that again joined up
could
cool. Really help create a doorway.
Some of that data we haven't been able to publish, but we're looking into it. I'll have to check with my data team, but we publish what we can. We have about 7 million people use our data every year. So, you know, we don't know what is important to people unless you tell us. So if there's a huge, you know, like philanthropy or charities kind of stuff, we will publish that. But again, if there's a community need for more information in a certain area, we'll prioritize it. But yeah, it's amazing what people search for. You just never know. That's why we take a real boil in the ocean approach. We just publish everything. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, look, I think it's so super important because remembering Ihuama, that FigureNZ is a charitable organisation, much like yourselves, and perhaps we can create a more stronger relationship and connection between our entities so that, again, we can better serve our communities. So that's super exciting. Kay Jones, thank you very much. She's just shared an awesome resource on consent and actually consent or implicit consent and what that actually means for an individual could be helpful. So we'll get that out through to you all as well.
I knew there'd be something there.
Yeah, thank you. And overall, look, thank you so much, Ngapera, first and foremost, for coming to share your knowledge, your information, and your absolute passion for data. But most importantly, you break it down and you put humans at the centre, people at the centre. And not only are you helping to get through some quite cloudy, challenging environments to bring this information to life, you're also always thinking about what does this really mean for people, particularly people that really, really need it. So, Ihuama, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
Community Research are currently planning an exciting array of webinars and resources for 2021. So if you're new to our whānau today, it's your first time beaming in, and or you're watching a retake of this video later on, and we'd like to invite you to subscribe to the monthly e-newsletter, e-pānui, via the website www.communityresearch.org.nz. There's also a Community Research Facebook page so that you keep up to date with any upcoming events. And also this video will be shared on the Community Research YouTube channel. So if you need to come back to some of the key points and or you want to share this video with your colleagues to learn more about the power of harnessing data, then we'd like to invite you to do so as well. So again, just please, Ihuama, thank you very much for taking the time to be here. The action that we want you to take is tune into communityresearch.org.nz, link up to figure.nz as well. Fire all your questions towards Ngapera.
Yes,
I understand they're a small team, so they might not get back to you straight away, but I know that Ngapera is really committed to great service. And for those of you that have tuned in today to take this hour out of your workday to hang out with us, it's so awesome. And thank you for being present with me whilst I was trying to stay cool and stunning and getting attacked by flies at the same time, which is not about that. So thank you for coming in today. Ngapera, do you have any final words that you want to share with our whānau?
Yep. Technology is just the tool, it's not the mission. We keep our people at the centre of everything we do. Because if, we could have all the data in the world and all the technology in the world, but if our people are still not thriving, then we haven't done our jobs. So I just want to thank you all for the work that you do serving your communities. I hope that you've got a few more tools in your kete to be able to help unlock some of that data that's out there. But also I hope that it kind of inspires you to think about data in a different way and think about, how are you going to harness the power of data for you and your children. Things are changing all the time, but good luck. And it's been a pleasure today. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. Do keep your eyes peeled for the next webinar, and we'll be launching the topic very soon. I'm looking forward to being back and beaming into your offices over 2021 and beyond. E te tuahine Ngapera, he uri no te Aotearoa waka, ngamihi kaua tu kia koe, kia koutou katoa ko taimai, e mātakitaki ana, i tēnei kaupapa, aroha nui kia koutou. Thank you, everybody. Ka kite.
The Community Research website offers a hub for good community research and researchers. It's the place for the public to find and share evidence about effective community practices. The website collects research and evidence and organizes these so that they can be easily accessed and used by other groups. You can access this research and browse by category, by a list of quick-link topics, or by searching for something specific. All of the research is free to download. The Community Research site is all about excellence and effective practices. You can view recordings of past webinars and find out about future ones. The webinars share evidence about what's working in the community sector. Published by Community Research in 2007, the Code of Practice provides the standards and guidelines for doing research. It's the place to start if you're thinking of undertaking research with or in a community or iwi. As well as the collection of research, we keep a register of experienced researchers who are skilled at working with iwi and communities. To find a researcher who can help you, we have a filter system which allows you to find people based on location, qualification, ethnic group, and area of expertise. The Community Research website is a unique resource for the community sector to use and share. It matters because communities who learn well will do well. It matters because it evidences what's working for us. For researchers and community people alike, we've made it as easy as possible to share your research on our website. Kaua e whakama. Uploading material is quick and simple. Save your work as a PDF and head over to Share Research. Answer a few questions that help us tag and organize the research so it's easy for people to find. If you're a researcher and skilled at working with communities, you can add your details to the directory of researchers so that you can be found. Community research keeps you updated and informed. This helps make you more effective. If you want to stay updated about the latest research, informed about new resources and our upcoming webinars, head over to sign up for our e-news on the home page. Community research is a rich resource built for and by the community. For it to reach maximum potential, we rely on you to contribute, participate, and support the resource to grow and thrive. Mā te kotahitanga e ora ai tātou.